Labour now realises the greatest threat to denying Slippery Starmer a second term is not Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, but this man.
I got a chance today at PM Keir's to ask about prisoner releases. I'm worried. We're letting the wrong people out and maybe putting the wrong people in.
And because of what they view as the power of him having that broadcast platform on GB News, that they now intend to shut down. And the latest dystopian crackdown on free speech shut down his ability to do what he just did on show last night. So just 2 weeks after Labour was elected, a senior figure within the party confirmed to me there was indeed a secret plot to remove Farage from GB News. This is what they told me. Starmer's plan from the start has been to use the second job controversy as a way to get Farage off air for good. And today, that plan began. It's all being done through the auspices of the boringly titled Modernisation Committee, which intends to tighten rules on second jobs, including, and here's the key quote, examining whether paid outside engagement such as MP media appearances, journalism and speeches provides a benefit to the public or present a conflict of interest. Now, I promise you, this is all about targeting one man and one man alone. I actually find this whole thing quite fascinating because as a launch presenter of GB News, let me tell you, the management were very reluctant at the start to make Nigel the face of the channel. Indeed, they only gave him a weekly show to begin with where he was balanced out by two lefties, and actually, they wanted to hire Alistair Campbell to begin with to be paired with him. But I insisted on hosting Nigel on the opening night of GB News, and the rest, as they say, is history. As a result, Farage is the one man most likely to challenge Slippery Starmer staying in number 10. And here is why they want to shut down Nigel Farage, because he's already representing the silenced majority better than any MP. Like today, writing in the Daily Telegraph that the public were failed by the official silence over the Southport atrocity. A lack of swift clarity on the ground is a dereliction of duty. He's right, we all feel it, but no MPs. Certainly no party leaders are brave enough to voice this stuff. So of course, all of a sudden the Labour client journalists and the MSM are very excited about this plot to get Nigel deplatformed. Like Sly News political editor Beth Rigby, who wrote, "The second job crackdown as promised by Starmer is coming. House of Commons Modernisation Committee to ban MPs from advising on public affairs and will look at MPs' broadcasting gigs. Farage listed in Register of Interest as receiving £97,000 by GB News for 32 hours work a month in August. He subsequently issued a clarification and said the sum listed includes VAT and was for several months of work. It was paid to my company, which has significant expenses." Now, it's interesting, isn't it? That Beth, our COVID party gal, suddenly gives a damn about MPs working as broadcasters because she seemed to have no problem before the last election paying a serving backbench MP, Jess Phillips, now a minister, bucket loads of money to present on her dire flop podcast, Electoral Dysfunction. I mean, I have to say, I think seeing those three women in a row would probably give any straight man electoral dysfunction, but I'm probably not the one to ask about that. No one also gave a damn when the Labour Broadcasting Company, formerly known as LBC, was paying Angela Rayner and David Lammy, both Labour frontbenchers at the time, to host prominent shows. So, of course, today, Lee Anderson, a Reform UK MP, paid £100,000 by GB News to present a weekly show, went on GB News to make his case.
This is actually something else, a targeted attack to silence people like you and Nigel Farage.
I think, Martin, to be honest, this is more sinister. We've seen this new modernisation committee set up. Some people may say it may be like a kangaroo court. I think it's got 9 Labour MPs, 3 Conservatives, 2 Lib Dems. Funnily enough, not one single Reform UK member of Parliament is allowed to go on these committees. They're going to make decisions that affect all of us in Parliament, and it's chaired by a cabinet member as well, which is unheard of for a select committee. It appears that, GB News coming for a lot of flack early doors. It still does from Ofcom and the left. They don't want this station to exist. They don't want Reform UK to exist. Like I said, we're not on any select committees in Parliament. They're trying to shut us down at every opportunity. One of the best platforms we have got, which is GB News, and I think we're quite impartial, to be honest, on our shows, especially Nigel. I mean, it's great.
Now, the very annoying thing about working on GB News, let me tell you, is that the organisation is overrun by money-hungry leftists who grift on a channel that they actually want to see shut down. None more so than a lady called Rebecca Reid, who had this hilarious Barney with Lee on air in the last hour.
I have a set of values which I stick to. Unfortunately, some constituents will never agree with me, but lots do. My vote should...
Your job is to serve the people who elected you. You are a public servant. It shouldn't be about what you want. It should be about what the people who gave you your job want.
Well, listen, let me come back on that. You know, just a couple of years back, young lady, when we had COVID on the pandemic.
Would you mind not calling me young lady? My name is Rebecca.
Is there a pronoun conflict?
Not a pronoun contact. I'm not particularly young. I'm in my 30s, and my gender is irrelevant. If you could just call me Rebecca, which is my name. I've worked on GB News for
okay then, Rebecca.
We have met each other more.
Yeah, okay. I think what you need to do, Rebecca, is go back to bed and call for a nurse.
Hey, come on, gentlemen. Let's keep
it's ridiculous, Martin. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Let's keep it civil. All right, that was.
Completely. Thank you so much for that witty piece of debating. What a really clever.
Let's knock it on the head.
Yeah, let's knock it on the head. Martin Daubney would have been terrified about losing his job if he allowed that free discussion to go on. But Rebecca Reid is everything wrong with GB News, and these days the amount of leftists who pollutes its airtime to appease the off-communists makes it almost impossible to watch. That's why I support Ofcom Watch, a new organisation lobbying for the regulator to be abolished. And they wrote today, when free speech is under assault, we need to be creative in resisting government restrictions. Move to another platform, Nigel Farage, and freedom lovers will follow. And to be honest, I completely agree. Nigel should do that. The tentacles of Ofcom are making life impossible for him to say anything on air. Apparently, Ofcom is about to start regulating GB News' online content as well. And by the way, let me tell you, Nigel, there is a revolution happening right here in the independent media. And you know, because you're watching me here on an unregulated show where I am only answerable to you, my viewers, not nefarious billionaire investors, and not a horrible Labour-run government regulator. Nigel has bigger fish to fry anyway. As the Reform UK chairman Zia Yusuf wrote today, the Soviet-style systematic persecution of his political enemies will be Starmer's legacy. He will be a one-term MP. Oh yes, he will. I've been saying this since before the election, which opens the doors for a PM Farage, which is why Labour is already on this deranged mission to silence him. Now let me bring in today's superstar panel. And I'm delighted today to be joined by two outspoken regulars. The owner of True Conservative Media, Chris Davies, who describes himself as a social, cultural and fiscal conservative and free speech absolutist. And Charlie Sansom, the political commentator, host of X Uncensored, Sundays 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. on Spaces on Elon Musk's platform, formerly known as Twitter. And I'm delighted to say that this Sunday at 7 p.m, I will be joining Charlie on X Uncensored. So that is certainly reason for you to check out another free speech independent show. But Chris, what do you make of my revelation that Starmer is secretly using this committee to remove Nigel Farage from GB News?
Dan, thanks for having me on, and congratulations on reaching 50.
Thank you.
Farage derangement syndrome appears to be the American sneeze and we catch a cold. It's really not that surprising, of course, because I'm sure that he dreamt up this idea when David Lammy was hosting on LBC, because he would want to be consistent about that. He wouldn't want Labour MPs having a view any more than he would want Nigel Farage having a view. I'm sure that he's being completely even-handed You know I'm not telling the truth, Dan. It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. There is an argument about whether or not MPs should have second jobs in the media, and that's a reasonably valid argument, perhaps. My own view is that, let them do as they see fit, but I know others don't agree with that. But you know me, Dan, I'm free speech absolutist. It's the way I operate. I believe that people should be allowed to say what they want, where they want, when they want, without fear of recrimination or reprisal. But we're now living in Starmageddon. We're now living in autocratic times. And it was only a question of time before the opportunity was taken to try and clip Nigel's wings, because he's asking the uncomfortable questions that Starmer does not want to hear.
Very true. Charlie Sansom, the thing is, the MPs have to admit who they're getting money from, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's writing. In the members' register of interest, every single month, they have to say, I'm being paid this amount by the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mirror, LBC. So if all of a sudden they are unable to be paid for extra work, you're actually potentially risking more nefarious means in terms of rewarding people, because Nigel still might continue to appear on GB News on a regular basis. He just wouldn't be able to accept money for it. But first, guys, this is the best time of year, and girls too. Football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US. It's NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups, which is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the chat group. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left off the bench. Because let's be honest, no one wants to fumble their grooming routine, and that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to take care of those rogue nose and ear hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that will keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day. The Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes today with 2 free gifts: the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag. Premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken today at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So let me repeat, www.manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping with the code Outspoken. Stay on top of your grooming gang and be ready for anything the season throws your way.
Well, I am going to say something rather unpopular here, and that's that MPs should be paid more money. And the reason why I say that is because they wouldn't be encouraged or even interested in other work because they'd be getting a good enough salary from Parliament. Now, some people might say, well, hold on a minute, they get paid £91,000 and they fiddle their expenses and they get second houses, they get all these perks, benefits. Yeah, sure. But you're not getting the best. You're not getting the best of what we've got in this country. There are far better people qualified to be members of Parliament than what we have currently. You remove the elements of the boys' club and the scratchy back club, which is essentially what Labour and the Conservative parties are, you might actually encourage some real British patriots to get involved in politics. And at the moment, they're discouraged because of what they see.
But should Nigel Farage be able to be paid to broadcast on GB News 3 nights a week while he's a sitting MP?
Of course. Why not? See, people, I believe politics of the left is just politics of envy. If Keir Starmer, say, had a show on LBC, which is probably more suited towards his politics, and he was being paid 100 grand a month, do you think the Labour Party would be saying, oh, well, we better get a new Prime Minister? Or do you think they'd all be lining up saying, any chance of getting us, the graveyard shift for 50 grand a year instead?
Well, of course. David Lammy was broadcasting every single week as the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Labour had no issue. Beth Rigby was paying Jess Phillips to be on her awful electoral dysfunction podcast. Look, this is completely about Nigel, but what I hope I've revealed today to the public is that this is literally a law designed to stop Nigel from broadcasting on GB News. That's the only reason they're doing it. They're not doing it to stop folk writing columns and the Daily Telegraph or the Guardian or the Mirror. It is because they are targeting Nigel. But Chris, I think there is a very strong argument now to say, come on, Nigel, take the plunge. Join us in the independent media. Follow Tucker Carlson. Follow Dan Bongino. Follow Megyn Kelly. Follow where the viewers are going, because from what I'm told by senior sources at GB News, the off-communists are now also determined to regulate their online content as well.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a round of compulsory redundancies, Dan, which I'm sure you're aware of, that are about to sweep through GB News, which is unconnected to this, but nevertheless, I'm sure morale is not at its absolute highest. And I agree with you. Legacy media is dead. And GB News, as we both know, appeased the crocodile at every opportunity over the last couple of years. And as a result of that, became part of the very establishment that it was arguably set up to smash. And that's not happened. I mean, Charlie was dropping truth bombs aplenty just now. I happen to agree with him when it comes to you don't get the brightest and the best if you don't pay the right amount of money. And so you do get the sort of behaviour that Charlie alluded to around not only MP's salary being, 91,000. I'm sure a lot of people regard that as a very sizable salary, and it's certainly above the UK average. But is that what we want? We want slightly above the UK average, a little bit above the UK average, or do we want the very best? And if you want the very best, you do have to pay for them. So it may be an unpopular view, but I'm afraid you've got two people on here that are agreeing at the moment. I agree with Charlie.
The thing is, there is a wider attempt by the establishment to shut out Reform UK from anything that might give them a platform. So GB News is just one of them. But look at what Farage has also recently posted on X. Reform MPs boycotted the elections for select committee chairs in Parliament tonight. Despite us winning more votes than the Lib Dems, we are not allowed a single seat. This is a failure of democracy. And of course, Charlie, this is the system, isn't it? This is where the first past the post system does everything possible to stop insurgents, to stop challenges to the status quo, to stop those who want to break the stranglehold of the Uni Party. And it's wrong. It is absolutely wrong that Reform UK, with the millions and millions of votes that they received, has not one select committee seat. Now, I actually don't think it matters, because Reform UK with its 5 MPs is making much more noise than the Lib Dems with their 35 or however many they have. But you know the point that I'm making.
Yeah, I do. I think that, what people should be focused on more so than the exclusion of Reform UK is the fact that every time they speak, you saw Nigel the other day being heckled in Parliament for asking a question about two-tier policing. They don't want to hear it. You put reform on a committee, they're not going to want to hear it. But something that come up earlier on today that I realised before the show started going out was that you've actually got a cabinet minister sitting on one of the reform committees, one of the select committees, which is unheard of in Parliament.
Do you know what? I thought I'd got it wrong. The Lib Dems have 72 MPs. 72 MPs. They got fewer votes than Reform UK, which has 5 MPs. I mean, the system is rigged, Chris. But the fact that now they're rigging the system in other ways. Let's ban Reform UK from select committees. Let's ban Nigel Farage from being able to broadcast. I think it actually shows their terror. And I believe, Chris, they have a real reason to be terrified, because Nigel is coming, The revolution is coming, Reform UK is coming, and eventually they won't be able to use these little tactics to stop it.
No, they won't. They are obviously enjoying the, if we can call it a honeymoon period, with what they've done with winter fuel payments, with the release of prisoners. Starmer's personal rating, as you know, Dan, is in the toilet at the moment relative to where it was before the election, and rightly so. But the argument that I'm sure they will promulgate is that if you're going to do unpopular things, do it in your first year in office when you've got 5 years to put it right. But there's no question the direction of travel with this government. Anybody that expected that Starmer would be anything other than a hard left authoritarian autocrat was in clown cuckoo land. You've only got to look at his record, you've only look at his history to know that this is what was coming around the corner. And what he's trying to do is to consolidate his grip on power within the Labour Party. It's nothing to do with the opposition parties. They've got such a majority that Starmer believes he can do what he wants. But you're absolutely right. He's already marginalised a substantial chunk of the electorate just on those two issues alone, the early release of serious and violent offenders and the winter fuel allowance. So that's well over 10 million people that have been, directly affected by that. But at the moment, the argument is he doesn't need to care. But and I know, Dan, the direction of travel in this country with people like the Together Declaration, the support for reform, fastest growing party in the United Kingdom in terms of members, the momentum is already swinging away from the Labour Party.
It is. And with discussions like this, I think it will swing even further. Sadiq Khan now saying that prisoners should jump the queue for housing, with the Mayor of London saying that prioritising those released would help to cut reoffending. There has been outrage about this decision, of course, because think how difficult it is for ordinary, honest, hard-working folk to receive housing at the moment. Nigel Farage posted on X, Sadiq Khan wants free housing for criminals and illegal migrants, and he wants you to pay for it. Sharon Davies posted, how the hell are we making it a benefit to be a convicted criminal or an illegal immigrant to get housing before someone born in the UK that's abided by the law, not hurt others, not lied, paid their bills, and been a credit to society? I really despair where we are headed. And finally, actually, some response, some opposition from a Conservative. We don't get much of that anymore. Tom Tugendhat, who's running for the party leadership, says, so let me get this straight. Labour have released prisoners onto our streets. Sadiq Khan has given them priority for housing while the government have lowered the housing targets he keeps missing. When does Keir Starmer plan to start serving the British people? And I also like this from Reform UK, actually, who I thought got the contrast perfectly correct. On Monday, Keir Starmer released 1,700 prisoners early. Now Sadiq Khan says that those offenders should jump the housing queue and he wants you to pay for it. And look, the thing about this, Charlie, is that it will actually be a policy. Let's just get our head around this. It will be a policy where you are disadvantaged if you haven't broken the law.
Well, there is some nuance to this, and again, another unpopular comment I'm about to make. But if you put people back on the streets with no hope, the next thing they're going to do is go back to their old ways to commit crimes. Most people that have been released early, from some of the videos that I've seen, are one or the other. They're either very happy to be out and they're going to try and turn their life around, or they openly admit they're going to reoffend because in there they get 3 square meals a day. Tonight, one of the guys said on camera in one of the media interviews, he'll be sleeping on a park bench. So there is some nuance here. I do take on board the point, though, that we shouldn't actually be paying for criminals to be given social housing. But I do actually add to that by saying this. I believe that the home, is the foundation for prosperity. So I'm actually an advocate more so for the development of social housing, because I think if you take away the foundation, the root, the home, you've got no choice but to go into crime, and you've got no choice but to go into things like drugs and alcohol and ruin your life even further.
Look, I absolutely do understand the point that you're making, but Chris, people are fed up because We are already, in many cases now, losing accommodation to illegal migrants. And so now if you're also losing the opportunity of housing to prisoners, it's going to become almost impossible. And this is, by the way, for people who are working a good, hard, honest living every single day and cannot get a house in this country.
Well, I've solved the prisoner problem, Dan, because the 4,000 pensioners who will die this winter as a result of the withdrawal of the winter fuel allowance is 80% of the prisoners that are being released under the early release fixed tariff scheme. So when you then factor in that Starmer seems to next be targeting those living on their own to take away the single person's council tax deduction of 25%, they will be incentivized to take in prisoners and migrants. So I think actually, from the left's perspective, he solved the problem. I mean, I'm joking, of course. It's ludicrous that we are favouring migrants who are here for nefarious reasons, those who may even be genuine asylum seekers, over our own people. And in addition to that, when it comes to the early release of prisoners, I've got some sympathy with Charlie's perspective on this, because I do believe that a secure and stable home environment is the bedrock of good behaviour, good citizenry in this country. And undoubtedly, there does need to be more social housing built. That's beyond question. But prioritising those who have just come fresh out of prison and those who have arrived fresh off the boats on our southern border over the citizenry of the United Kingdom that the government is failing to protect is lunacy.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.